Hey y'all, hey y'all, hey y'all, hey y'all, what's up? This is another episode number 67 of the Full Set. I am your hostex with the mostex, none other than Didi Delgado. I am so beside myself for many reasons, but mostly because I'm going to be speaking with you tonight, all the folks from Ujima Boston. And I just want to welcome y'all. Welcome, welcome, welcome. And I want to introduce y'all in no particular order because we about to get funky anyways. So y'all cool with that?
Yep.
Cool, cool, cool. So here we go. So Nia Evans is the executive director of the Boston Ujima Project. Her educational background is in the areas of labor relations, education leadership, and policy. Her advocacy includes a focus on eliminating barriers between analysts and people with lived experiences, as well as increasing acknowledgement of the value of diverse types of expertise in policy. Jenny Geffrard. Jenny serves as Thank you. I was like really positive about it. Like you just got to sometimes. You saw it? Yeah. So Jenny serves as a small business alliance coach at the Boston Ujima Project. As a small business alliance coach, she is responsible for coordinating technical assistance and resources, developing business support programs, specifically in the area of money management. There's two words that go together. And credit counseling, meeting one-on-one with early stage businesses to improve their credit and financial knowledge and position. Put a marker in the calendar, team who is watching. Thank you. Cierra Michele Peters. Cierra works as an artist, a DJ, and a community organizer with projects that attempt to examine visual, spatial, and sensory representations of Blackness. Cierra is the director of communications at the Boston Ujima Project, and additionally, she is the co-founder of Print Ain't Dead. I feel like I read that like a poet. A bookstore and publishing platform for literary and text-based artifacts produced by Black, Brown, and Indigenous artists, including a workshop, political consciousness raising initiative, the Black Feminist Study Hall. Okay. Charles T. Wallace-Thomas the fourth, and that is the fourth because the V and the I goes before the V. Charles is a rising fourth year year student at Northeastern University studying economics and mathematics with a minor in psychology. Charles is committed to manifesting a future wherein all people thrive, not as an act of resistance, but as a logical consequence of living in communities that dignify, affirm, and enable humanity. Charles most recently served as the fund associate with the Boston Ujima Project, which works to create a new community-controlled economy in Greater Boston. At Ujima, he assisted in managing the Ujima Community Fund and co-developed the Ujima Neighborhood Economic Study Group to facilitate community-based participatory feasibility studies on community needs. Y'all, if y'all don't welcome yourselves, I don't know what the fuck to say. What does Ujima mean, first of all? Them's a lot of words to say y'all work with money and y'all work with Black folks. What's going on?
Nia, do you want to take this?
Well, I was going to say, Charles, it looks like you were ready to take it. You jumped in. I saw your screen light up first.
Oh, no, I was just muting myself, in part to say having my bio read is so weird. It's just such a weird experience. But please, Nia, I think you should go ahead.
Okay, all right, cool, thank you. So first of all, yes, Didi, you did say print ain't dead like a poet. You did read that like a poet. So I do want to affirm that. And also affirm that I too love Charles's name. I love saying his full name every time I say it. But yeah, real quick. So Ujima is Swahili for collective work and responsibility. So we work with money, we work with Black people, but most important is how we do it and to what end we do it. So it's not just to enrich us as individuals, and I use enrich expansively, but it's really to enrich our communities collectively.
Over here trying to pin comments because I hope the folks who are joining us know that this money conversation we're about to have comes with a responsibility. It comes with the responsibility to keep the funding going for these money conversations, because these are conversations we haven't been having. We haven't been having collectively. I feel like it on a minor level, we've been having them as individuals. Not when it comes to the macro level, everybody gets nervous, right? And so that's why I've been trying to get y'all down here, because I got some questions and I'm hoping y'all can help me.
Right.
Is that cool? And
Yeah.
is Nia gonna be the representative for the entire evening?
Well,
I feel like y'all
and I
got
was about to
circle
say,
processes going on.
thank-
I don't.
Thank you, Dee Dee. I was about to say, everybody, please, like, jump in. But
Let's do
also
this
give
popcorn
give
style.
people
Yeah.
permission to jump in, though. You know,
You
we're
want me
used
to give people permission?
Yeah, we're used to being part of panels where
Nah,
a question
I
is
don't give a
directed to you specifically, and then you got to unmute yourself. So
fam,
we got to know this is the kind of
When
conversation.
have you ever known me to mess with Black folk agency? Come on, y'all. Y'all better jump in and get in where you fit in or whatever, because I'm loud. Somebody needs to be like, do this real quick so I can see, because I talk with my hands. So if somebody else is talking with their hands, I'll be like, oh, let me shut up because let me listen. Okay, so we're gonna have an organic conversation. The people need to know. Y'all didn't even get a script or nothing. Like, I love it here.
Exactly.
Y'all was like, let's do this. And that's not the word you used, because I forced you through peer pressure to use a different word, but we're not gonna go there right now. So how did the Ujima project get started? Was it a slowly evolving process, or was there an event or a series of events that made it clear that Boston needed an organization like y'all?
All right, so I am going to be the representative here, but also the rest of the team, they're warming up. Okay,
so
they're going to get into the groove and they're going to get comfortable. But I've also been around the longest, and Cierra's been around the second longest. But what were you saying, Cierra?
I was gonna say, like Cameron would say, you know, we wasn't there, Nia was there. So I just want to like offer that, like Nia's answering these questions first.
But isn't this a socialist organization? Shouldn't y'all be carrying the stories too?
We getting there.
The
so that's what I'm saying.
The latter end we carry.
Yeah, we getting there. And
let me mind my business.
Cierra was around close to the beginning, so there's going to be a point, Cierra, where you can jump in. But to answer your question, Dee Dee, it's a combination of both. So, you know, what I mean by that is there's the evolving process in terms of you are in Albany now, but you've spent plenty of time in Boston. So you know the scene. What's going on?
I don't want to talk about being in Albany, but go ahead.
Okay, I was going to say you have a look in your face. So Boston has a very strong informal organizing infrastructure. And what I mean by that is not that the organizing in and of itself is informal, but there's a lot of strong organizing that happens that collectively makes up an informal infrastructure. Because it's not like, you know, we've necessarily all gotten together and said, okay, now let's all create something together. So that work's been going on for years. So we know Boston is a storied place. And around the time that Ujima was like really concretely conceived, this was around 2013, 2014, intense gentrification and displacement is happening, as in other Black communities in America. So that's happening. Also what's happening, or also what has happened is the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston has released a report about the racial wealth gap in Boston that actually just stuns everyone. So even you know, it's a reality that we know. It's different when numbers are attached to it. So you know, numbers are attached to poverty and the racial wealth gap, and it's stunning. And the numbers that get kind of quoted a lot are $250,000 median worth for an average white family versus $8.
Yeah, I remember the $8. I was in the room. I think you and I was in the room when they released that report at the Boston Federal Reserve.
Actually, yeah, I think we were. Yeah, and so you know, and so yeah, so that you know, and that's one of those reports. Like usually, you know, reports are dry, whatever. Not a lot of people are paying
that report was spicy.
That spread like wildfire. Exactly.
Yes.
So that spread like wildfire. And so that happens. So that happens, and that kind of you know, I guess I would say adds fuel to conversations that are already happening. and that's kind of at a city level. What's also happening, and so this is part of kind of like the evolution. So this is what I mean when I say it's a little bit of both. What's also happening is Aaron Tanaka, who you also know, is previously the ED of Boston Workers Alliance, which is an organization now defunct, but previously was working to reintegrate.
Why organizations got to be defunct? Why they can't just be like on pause? Maybe the work will pick back up. But I mean,
some stuff is permanently on pause, and then it's just defunct.
You know, I'd be taking offense to everything. Go ahead.
But yeah,
like BLM Cambridge is defunct. I'm like,
I mean, hey, and that could be a case as well. So, but we'll get into that in a little bit. But yeah, so that organization doing a lot of great work, reintegrating people returning home from incarceration to their communities, a focus on Black and Brown communities, which, as I understand it, was unique, even kind of within that field.
right.
And one of the ways that they were doing that was through employment. And so, and it was a member-based organization. And so they had a staffing agency that they would use to help their members find employment. And then also they worked on the policy front. And so one of the notable pieces of legislation that they're known for is being part of a coalition to pass ban-the-box legislation, which is employers can't ask you about your incarceration history at a certain part of the employment application process. Massachusetts is the second state in the nation to pass this. It's considered very progressive. It's very exciting. People are excited about all of the possibilities. And then the reality is the expected kind of benefits don't materialize. Number one, there are still ways outside of kind of what had been considered going into the legislation to access a person's record and supposed to be, and people are people. So their members were still experiencing discrimination, stigma. And so there's a sense of we are beholden to employers' goodwill. And that's not a good position to be in. We don't want to be in that position. And so the members decided they wanted to create their own opportunities for themselves. And one avenue that they saw for that was entrepreneurship. I should also mention that the late Chuck Turner is one of Aaron's mentors and also works really closely with that organization. And I mention that because that was a group of people who were aware of kind of like the broader political environment. So they learned on entrepreneurship. Let's create employment opportunities for ourselves by creating our own ventures, our own ventures, and then we will employ ourselves. They start like an alternative fuel company that doesn't quite hit. That's fine. So I think that's another important conversation for us to have in our communities, which is we fail just like everybody else. And we have, there's Black excellence on the one hand, which is great. We should not let go of that for sure. I'm all about Black excellence. And we also have, I would say, we also kind of engage in kind of like a hypercriticality of each other that for sure is like a function of white supremacy. And so we treat our failure a certain way. So that's another topic. But just important to mention that. So they try again, which is they know, as I said, they are part of kind of like the broader political landscape. They know that there's legislation that's just been passed that's coming down the pike that will have to be enabled and people will have to comply. And so this is legislation regarding composting, which is that businesses with a certain tonnage of food waste will be required to compost. And so they said, okay, I think there's a business opportunity there. We will help these businesses be in compliance. And so they started in Roxbury and Dorchester, a worker-owned composting co-op, worker-owned by Black and Latinx workers in Roxbury and Dorchester. All right, cool. So now it's time to get financing. And so same people.
Show me the money.
Right, exactly. So same people who could not easily get employed by other people, not surprisingly, not able to easily access traditional financing. By this point, Aaron Tanaka is at an organization, impact investing firm called Boston Impact Initiative, co-founded by Deborah Fries here in Boston. And that impact investing firm is essentially pioneering, for lack of a better word, I try not to use that word, but for lack of a better word, pioneering for focusing on racial equity within impact investing. So up until that point, impact is largely considered in environmental terms, and the environment does not include people and definitely does not include people of color. So
isn't that always the case when it comes to environmental justice?
Unfortunately, still. And yeah, that's another conversation. But so she brings in racial justice to this. She defines impact as including racial justice, and what that means is directly impacting or directly investing in people of color and directly investing in businesses owned by people of color. So Aaron is the managing director, I think that's the right title, of their first fund. So he's got this organizing experience from Boston Workers Alliance, and now he's got this finance experience with Boston Impact Initiative. He's positioned to help Cierra, which is the name of the worker-owned composting co-op that I mentioned earlier. He's positioned to help them access different types of financing that they can't get traditionally, which he does. So Boston Impact Initiative, as I understand, I want to say gave them a $20,000 loan that's recoverable. And so what that means is there are certain conditions that are set that basically say, ideally, pay this back. And at a certain point, depending on, kind of like the terms, maybe it converts to a grant under these conditions, which means you no longer have that obligation to us, but this is something we've deemed ahead of time. They got a $150,000 grant from the Barr Foundation, which is a local foundation here.
I saw that news. I said, go ahead, Cierra, with your bad selves. Okay.
Well, and this is actually at that time. This isn't recent. This is like 2013, 2014, I want to say. There was a new round of grants that Barr Foundation gave out this year in response to the uprisings to Black-led organizations. I'm not sure what kind of grant they got then. I don't know what kind of category of funding that was considered in. This is important. I think they got probably about $15,000 of pro bono service from attorneys. And they needed that to kind of help them set up the process of doing a DPO, which is a direct public offering. And so a direct public offering is kind of like an IPO, but for regular people. And so
I feel like I'm learning some shit.
Exactly. It's very cool stuff.
So IPOs are like the thing that Facebook does or whatever, or something like that.
Yep. So
but you're
like
saying DPO stuff. Is like niggas on the block could just like release a DPO. Like
Exactly.
Okay. All right.
Exactly. So with this DPO, Cierra raised, I want to say $350,000. Wow. And this is from regular community members. It was a little steep. So like the minimum investment was $2,500. So it's still not, it accessible, could be more accessible, but it's definitely more accessible than, the glamorous stuff that we hear about. And then there are the workers themselves, and that's their sweat equity. So the process that I just kind of outlined, basically in that are different types of money that we just talked about. So we've got impact investing money, we've got foundation money, we've got regular people money, we've got some pro bono services, and then we have kind of like the sweat equity from workers.
Is that y'all's time bank that I was looking at? Like it's a social skills share. Like my business partner was like, "This is a socialist organization," and he was so excited that I was interviewing y'all. Y'all have a time bank.
Yeah, you want to talk about that, Charles?
Yeah. So I'm glad you brought that up, because the time bank is one of the really fascinating things about Ujima that like is exemplary of why I'm excited about Ujima all the time. Anyways, which is we are not only changing the old things that don't work for us, but we're actively creating and contributing to the creation of these new things that are self-led and that allow us to operate within our own definitions of what the world should and could feel like. And so our time bank is kind of a way for us to see what an economy would look like if money weren't at the center of all of our transactions. So it's literally a bank for time. So money, to jump into economics for a moment, money is only something that is a store of value, a unit of account, you can count it, and then a method of exchange. So that's all that money needs to be. And so time banking is a concept that recognizes that time can be all of those things. So the time bank basically works where if I were a baker and you were a painter, and I had accumulated like 25 hours in the time bank by performing different tasks for other people, and I needed my bakery painted, I would come to you and say, hey, it's going to take 2 hours to paint my cafe. Can you come and do that for me? And I would pay you the 2 hours. And then you might use the 2 hours in exchange for paint somewhere at a paint manufacturer who's also a part of the time bank, but not necessarily a list of volunteers and people who can volunteer, but literally talking about mutual aid. How do we make sure that we can distribute the resources that we have collectively, which is what the Ujima Fund is doing, but also recognizing that there are more to resources in our community than just the dollar. It's our skills and experiences and the time that we have to contribute to it.
Thank you. I want to ask a question of Cierra. Cierra, as a community organizer, an artist, and a DJ, this is burning in my soul. I would not be my authentic self if I did not ask this question. It had come to my attention, because this ain't an interview, this is a conversation. It's come to my attention that, the old adage, too much is given, much is gained, right? And it's come to my attention that we have surpassed a lot of money. I'm like, I didn't even realize how much money. Like, I have all these people doing like reconciliations of accounts from 2017, 2018, 2019, because I'm just like filing my taxes and then paying the taxes on it. And people are like, no, what are you doing? What are you doing? And so now we're at a stage where all this money has gone out, and I'm like, wow. As a Black person, I think about Adrienne Maree Brown and how she says a person becomes trustworthy when you trust them. How do you like move this money? How do you associate yourself with these funds, with these grants, with these investors, with these big names, and still remain, one, true to yourself, and two, remain trustworthy even when people make assumptions, right, about where you at and where you've landed? I'll wait.
Wow. Why do I have to get the hardest question? You must have known that.
You can share the labor. I was like, I saw you as a community organizer. So I was like, Sib, let me ask you, because I'm going through it right now.
It's all good. I mean, I think that's like a really interesting question. And I'm a Sagittarius, so I love dealing in like the loftier, concepts and things like that. How do you stay true to yourself? I mean, I think that it honestly just comes back to like whatever your version of liberation is. I think that there's like just multiple paths of liberation. Like, we all talk about this at Ujima a lot. It's just like, for some people, that might be one thing. For another person, it might be another. For some people, it's economic. For some people, it's like, being able to raise your kids at home and like do homeschool. And like, that's your form of liberation. And that's like you making sure that the next generation is like just not beholden to the same concepts and BS that you had to grow up with, right? So that's all that I can really say is just like find your own, pathway to liberation, figure out what that really is. And like for me, that comes through study, and that comes through like study of history and study of movements and study of like what people before me, especially like Black women, have done to like make it through. But I think that for everyone, it's going to be different.
Can I just add a quick story? Because I don't know if you remember this, Cierra, but I think you were uniquely suited to answer or to get this question, because the first time that we met, it was at a Ujima meeting. Like we have open member meetings every Wednesday nights or we did before, now, where folks will get together and we do these political education meetings and we have member teams and stuff. But we all do introductions, what's your name, why are you here, how'd you get here? We definitely do have the Wednesday meetings still. They're just online. So that caveat.
Plug, we have you tomorrow. Free to come.
Tamita Frazier, studying alternative education.
Yeah, so constant education that's accessible to people, which is really important. But just briefly, I introduced myself, in a similar way, like, hi, I'm Charles, I'm this 18-year-old freshman at Northeastern, or whatever. And then I talked to, Cierra is obviously a really interesting person, so I went up to her afterwards and I was like, hey, nice to meet you. I saw that you were kind of affiliated with Northeastern too, and you kind of look at me and you go, yeah, you said something along the lines of, it's interesting how people identify themselves with these institutions that they're a part part of. And I was just kind of like, oh, I need to center myself, to bring myself down, to figure out who I actually am and why I'm here and what I'm representing. And that still hasn't stopped for me. So I really appreciate for that moment.
Yeah, because that's just a Boston thing, I think. I think that people just like, you know, first they ask you, you know, what your name is, and then they ask you immediately after, you know, what you do, or like who you're affiliated with, or like, you know, whatever the thing is.
How can I value you right now in this moment?
Exactly. Like, what's your social capital to me right now? And so, you know, it's just like, for me, like that doesn't really, I have always just kind of like, thankfully, you know, my family has always let me be a person first, right? So like, you know, that exists for me, and, you know, hopefully for other people, like maybe that's maybe I liberated Charles in that moment, maybe, you know, in the next moment Charles will be liberating me. But I would love to hear Nia and Jenny's.
Well, no, so what I was going to say, thank you, Cierra, and I was going to say, Jenny, actually, you kind of framed that question for us at our staff retreat. Actually, Jenny, you and Cierra did, so it is actually perfect, Didi, that you directed this question towards Cierra, because I believe it was
I asked the questions.
Yeah, and you asked, is trust earned or given? Oh, no, this is one of our check-in questions in our staff meeting. I think you asked, is trust earned or given? And Jenny, you said given. And so I think it'd be interesting for you to answer that question, given that I was like, oh, it's earned. It is not given, it's earned. And you said it's given. Yeah.
So I move through life a little bit differently. I find that giving trust for me is an opportunity to allow people to show me who they are freely without closing myself off to the possibility of growing and understanding and empathizing with their story. So when I give trust, it's really a gift to myself, because it allows me to be more open to that person. For me, when trust has to be earned, I'm already putting you through a series of like tests that you have to go through in order to make it there, right? So I find it easier for me to accept people and understand their stories more when I just freely give trust. And if you lose it, you lose it. You don't have to convince me 2-3 times to let go. Because once I let go, I'm like, you know what? You showed me who you are. I believe you.
What's your sign?
I'll let you go. I am an Aquarius.
Yes. Yeah, it's Pisces, 0 degrees Pisces, all Aquarius. Yes. Okay. Thank you. Just giving and shit to the community. Go ahead, Nia.
Yeah, I think what I want to add to that question, Didi, so I don't identify as an organizer, which is important to say, because I get classed as an organizer a lot. But I don't identify as an organizer.
You know why you get identified as an organizer? Because you organize with organizers. So it's like one bad apple spoils a whole bunch. Come on now, go ahead.
Right, exactly. Well, and so on that note, the thing that I connect to, you know, when you say you organize with organizers, for me it's relationships. And the main reason why I don't identify as organizers, because I do think organizing requires a skill set. And so I respect people who actually have that skill set. So while it might be kind of neat to label myself that, I don't think I have the skill set that I see in organizers that I would say are really good at what they do. But what I think is really important is relationships. And when you ask, you know, how do we kind of associate ourselves with, or I won't even say associate, but how do we work with different types of people? How do we kind of earn trust, and you know, how do people give us trust to work in this arena? I would also say relationships are a big part of it, and I do think that this kind of does, you know, I appreciate Jenny's point, because there definitely has to be a degree of give in relationship building. And so I think what allows us to keep people's trust is our attention to relationship building and accountability. And, you know, I think Cierra talked about that already in terms of kind of understanding what liberation looks like for each of us. And so So when I say accountability, for me, it's just really just about integrity and groundedness. It isn't really necessarily kind of like, the accountability that has us reporting to anyone or anything like that, but just really just reflection. Am I grounded? Do I have a sense of what I'm doing and why? And how does that show up in how I'm interacting with others? And then I would say that would be the case for us organizationally as well.
Okay, so I just want to piggyback off of that. And you said it's about relationships, and Jenny said it's about giving, and Cierra said it's about being true to yourself. And Charles was like, how do I examine these things? So a question that I was thinking of is, when we already know that there's so much fracture in the Black community, right? And it's fracture. I appreciate what you said in the very beginning. The fracture really comes from white supremacy. I'm not going to sit here and act as if, we don't fail and we're just doing great at being Black. Like, it's like we're doing great at it. But I wonder, with so many fractures in our community, how do you think that we as a community can shift to taking care of ourselves and taking care of each other, instead of relying on the bootstraps or relying on, well, everyone else is doing it, right? If we're looking, Charles had said something that I hear a lot, especially from Kendra Hicks, that I'm trying to create a world in which I want to live in, like I'd actually want to live in, right? And some people would agree that that means capitalism. I just want nice things. And some people think that that's socialism. I just want everyone to have nice things. You know what I'm saying? I want everyone to have basic needs met too. Like, you know what I'm saying? But how do we take care of ourselves and take care of one another when there's so much collective and individual trauma in our community?
Wow. That's a really thoughtful question. I think first it would be like recognizing that it exists, and that like how we get to the other side is not just going to be by like turning on a light switch and like everybody's decolonized. I think that sometimes we think about these things like abstractly or ahistorically, and it's like, all right, when we start from where we are now, like what can happen when we start from where we are now? So like when you say that quote from Kendra, like that just resonates with me so hard. I think like at the beginning of COVID, Nia and I were having a lot of conversations on Sundays because we were working on Sundays. And, we were just thinking about like how our society is ordered and how we can like formalize like the values that we say that we have, and do the things and like, and mechanize the things that we say that we want to do, right? Like, how do we actually get to the point where we're like not just entrenched in values and like platitudes, but actually getting to the doing and the practicing of our values. And so we started talking about like this thing that we called necessary systems daily. And so we just every day would like post something, or so it was essentially a campaign where we would like actually like name the values or like the things that we said that we wanted, and then talk to people about how to do them. And it was like small things, large things.
Give me an example of a small thing that people can do and you taught them how to do it.
Ooh, I don't know if I want to say that we taught them how to do it, but a small thing was just like meditating every day, or like making sure that you're not reading the news every 5 minutes. Like today you meditate, tomorrow you're going to read the news, the next day, and you're going to stay informed about like what's happening.
Yeah, spread it out.
You do a different thing, and then exactly. So
you got to spread the atrocities out.
Exactly. Exactly. And so I think that when we start there and we realize like, okay, we can never go back, right? Like COVID has happened, white supremacy has happened, like all these things have happened, we can never go back. Okay, so what do we do when we start right now today, 8/17?
And to piggyback off of what Cierra just said, acknowledgement for me is the first step. And there's a matter of like sharing stories in order for us to progress. Because one of the things that I've learned through personal experience and just in noticing how people move, trauma thrives in silence. You continue to feel broken when you aren't sharing your stories in order to heal and move forward. So I find that part of this work is really helpful when you are surrounded by others that are willing to listen to the story, but not just to sit in it, but to grow with you about the next step.
Thank you.
Oh,
And I
okay.
feel like, go ahead. Of course, Charles.
Okay,
Please.
I figured
Popcorn.
Charles had something. Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to say, and this is another thing that I appreciate about Ujima is in doing all of this work, I feel like, at least for me this summer, there was this time pressure that was put on it. We have all of this attention right now, so we need to do as much as we can right now. And I think we have to kind of disabuse ourselves of timelines that aren't our own. So at Ujima, it might take us a couple of months to get a vote done, to make a decision, but the way in which that decision happened was the exercise of a muscle that may react faster the next time it happens. So we can't, I think, allow ourselves to continue to be bound by this cycle of white people be paying attention and not paying attention and paying attention and not paying attention, because it can really burn a lot of folks out.
Yeah, and I'm just trying to thank you, Charles. I'm trying to kind of get all of the aspects of your questions, because there's the piece about so fractures in Black communities, individual
Wait, I have an
individual
addendum
trauma,
to the
community
question.
trauma. I guess the thing that okay,
Is that okay that I add the addendum?
I'm ready for it.
So I'm gonna do the Boston
Yep.
thing and say that MSW T Sherry, literally, Black MSW was like, I got some questions. T says, how do you get to the root of the issues within the Black community in Boston without aligning yourselves with the primary concerns of those put in positions of power from those outside of your community? Or is it something you do? And that alludes to what Charles is saying. A lot of us, myself included, I've read This Is an Uprising, and I've been part of training cohorts that were like, this is buzz time, this is non-buzz time, this is, and you're right, that's not our timeline. Nobody Black came up with that shit. Like, you know what I'm saying? So how do we make sure that we are vested in ourselves when the resources are outside of the community? Like, how do we then not become Black excellence in this elite group of people that are doing this work? I hope I did justice to your question, T.
Okay, yeah, so I think I can try to manage both at the same time, because so one thing I'm just thinking about is what we know about ourselves, and by that I mean Black people. So I think we need to, if we are not already, hopefully we are, but if we are not already, and I do think that we are kind of like collectively in the zeitgeist, but I would say as a person, we should be asking ourselves, I think, what it is we know about ourselves, and where that knowledge of ourselves came from. So I think that is crucial, because I mean, one of the things that I've thought about for a long time, kind of on the story front, is the narratives that we perpetuate about ourselves, accepting them as unvarnished truth when they're not, and we should examine them. So that's one thing. And so I think part of that is that we don't have the resources within our communities to resource the work that we want to do. So I think that is a belief that we should very intentionally, directly challenge, however it feels. And I think that's some work that Ujima does. So I think that kind of ties back to the Time Bank, for example, because one of the things that the Time Bank does is it assigns value, not necessarily kind of like a concrete quantifiable value, but just in and of itself, it basically says that what we have to offer, our skills, our gifts, our talents, what we have to offer are valuable. And we don't have to, what's the word, derive its value from what it would command on the market, so to speak, because we know, because of white supremacy, it is going to be undervalued on the market. And so I think we should just kind of actually just move with that assumption that whatever we have to offer, and I mean any and everything, we can be sure it is undervalued on the market. And so then we need to know that whatever we are told that value is, it's more. And so then we should be deciding what is it. And again, it doesn't have to be a monetary quantifiable value. So I think that's one thing. So and that's just not talking about money. Now, when we are talking about money, and that's more in this kind of like the broad resources space. And money, as Charles said, is one type of resource. And so I just think it's important for us as communities to understand the types of resources that we do have already in our communities and how we can be, again, honoring them and putting them to use. So that's one thing. And then I think the second thing is, if we're talking very specifically about money, also understanding we have that as well. But again, to me, it's how do we assess that? So when we look at the Ujima Fund, which is part of Boston Ujima Project, and the Ujima Fund is a $5 million fund that we launched in December 2018. When we launched it, it made history as the nation's first democratically governed fund. And so that democratically governed comes from a couple of pieces. So one is it's super accessible. So it's a minimum $50 investment. So that's our way of trying to provide an investment vehicle and a wealth building vehicle for our people here in Boston. I mean, Massachusetts, because that pool was for Massachusetts residents. We're really looking at Boston. So that's one thing. The second thing is the way those so let me pause with that. So minimum investment is $50. It's a $5 million fund. So essentially, and we have a few different pools. The next pool, the minimum investment is $1,000. Then the next pool, the minimum investment is $5,000. So when I go back to kind of the Cierra story that I told earlier, I talked about different types of money. And the key with that is that's different types of money coming together in one place. And so what I'm trying to draw there is what we're saying is we could take a whole bunch of $50 investments. We could take a whole bunch of $1,000 investments. The maximum individual investment is $250,000. So we definitely have some larger investors in there. And we can take a whole bunch of $5,000 investments and we can get to 5 million. And I think that's important to understand. So I think it's important to understand that the types of resources that we're working with in our communities, because of what has been stolen from us. So that's important to understand. I think again, even as more and more of the American story is being excavated, there's still just not enough of us that actually knows the real story. So it's also important to understand the wealth that has been directly stolen from us, because that also speaks to our capacity and possibility, and how that was interrupted. As an aside, I don't know if you watch Lovecraft Country, but it is reminding me of episode 4 of Lovecraft Country. Oh, really? Okay, you gotta tell us why later. I love that show. But let me finish this answer first. So there's that, right? So there's, because of the history of this country, in degree, our resources look a certain way. And if we're just talking about money. So in terms of degree, again, we have this stat, the median net worth is $8. And again, that just means net worth. I think a lot of people kind of confuse that means that's all that family has. That's not what that means. That just means you take the assets, you subtract liabilities, and what's left is 8. But families are definitely working with a lot more than that. So my point being is, you can look at a Boston and you can take 100 families, and you can pull together $50 from each of those 100 families, and you can do quite a lot. So that's really just what I'm trying to get to with that. And so just understanding we have the resources, just the way they come together is going to look different. It's not going to look like 8 Black Bill Gates in a room deciding something. It's just not going to look that way. It's going to come together differently. It's going to be a different process. And so then where that ultimately ends up is then understanding that we have those resources in our communities. We don't have to look outside of our communities for those resources as much as we do now. So I think that's the key, is understanding what we actually have, valuing what we have, and really challenging this belief that most of what we need lies outside of our communities, because it isn't true.
Thank you. That was really comprehensive, and I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Jenny, go ahead, Cierra. What happened?
I said Nia said period.
Period.
You said that so dryly and sarcastically, Dee Dee.
No, that was so comprehensive. I'm gonna have to go back and watch it just to make sure I understood what it all means. So thank you. I appreciate it. I feel like it was rich content, you know. I feel like you answered my entire question and I don't even remember what the fuck the question was. So thank you. I mean it. Thank you. You know. I feel like Ben Stein means it, you know, whatever. Like, thank you. So Jenny, I wanted to ask you, and then I'm gonna ask everyone else, what is the deciding factor? What brought you to Ujima?
Great question. There's so many ways that I can answer this because I literally met with Nia, I think 3 times. Once with Allison, with, I just forgot the name of the organization.
United Way.
Thank you. And Carlene, who was at the time at LISC, but Nia and I met like 3 times. And I remember the driving force of me choosing to be with Ujima was the vision of another Boston is possible, where we get to dictate what's in our communities. We get to dictate how we invest in the businesses, which businesses we wanted in our neighborhoods. I felt like that was such a different conversation from all the other conversation I've heard, or and it was always like, hey, this is what the Black community needs, instead of, hey, Black community, what do you need in your own community? So I told Nia at that point, I'm willing to volunteer. You don't even have to pay me. They chose to pay me. I'm thankful, but I was willing to just volunteer at that point. So it's just the vision of knowing that another Boston was possible and that it involved us using our collective voices. That's what brought me to Ujima.
Going once, going twice. Anybody else?
Nia, is anybody else going to jump in? I don't know.
I will just.
You or Charles. Yeah.
Yeah, I will just say briefly, if it's okay, Sia. What brought me to Ujima was very similar to what brought Jenny to Ujima. One, the fact that I was able to meet with Nia like one-on-one as this random college freshman, and I was like, that generosity of spirit and time was an indicator that was a good place to be. And then also, Ujima is situated in this very unique space, which is, actively confronting all of the working edges of all the questions that we need to be thinking about. So how are we resisting the old? How are we building the new? How are we building capacity for people to do this work for themselves and in community with other folks? So it's a really interdisciplinary place that is rigorous, and not in the sense of like, academic rigor, which is often used to delegitimize anything that's not in conformity with, the hegemony, but it is rigorous in the sense that there's a strong commitment to do things the right way, meaning in community, in a substantive community with people who are affected.
Yeah, I love that. I also have a very similar origin story where I met with Nia, Aaron, and I think Hendrix as just like a rando. Just like as an artist, and with my 2 friends, and we like had this idea for this thing, and they were like actually willing to meet with us. And I don't think that I understood like how big of a deal it was to be in that space at that time, to be in community with those people, just being someone that like was just like a 22-year-old artist that like had an idea and wanted to do something. And like at the time I still am really interested in like urban planning and spatial justice. So when I read like the 20-page like concept paper thing, I was like, wow, this is like gentrification, but everybody stays. I think that that's like where my head immediately went. And so yeah, I don't know. I think that it was like kind of, very similar to Charles, very similar to Jenny, where it was just like, this could actually work. I think after I read the concept paper, I was just like, oh, this is actually brilliant. I need to be here was like the thing that I felt.
Yeah, and I think for me, I guess this will tab back to Tina's question, I think, which is, so before I was at Ujima, I was at the Boston branch of the NAACP. 2015, I was there when I met you, Dee Dee. 2015, I'd become the chair of the Economic Development Committee. So I was volunteering. It later then became a paid position as the ED of the branch. But I at the time there was a Boston 2024 conversation. I don't know if you remember that. Yes, yep. You remember that for sure.
We served on the NAACP together, but gone.
Dee Dee, you were not in the NAACP at the time. You came later.
I was.
Oh, the next year.
Yes. And I promptly left. But go ahead, tell your
story.
story.
I think what's funny? I think it never like registered that you were formally, because you were part of the committee that Roxanne ran, right? And then yes.
Like that's how I just looked at you, because you were like, I don't know. Once upon a time I met Dee Dee Delgado. I can't remember where.
Okay, because you know what I count as our meeting day is
Harvard.
I don't know if you remember when. No, before that, Terry Marshall and Aisha
at the Design Institute, we were making T-shirts and shit.
Yeah, and they had gotten a bunch of people together who were doing Black Lives Matter stuff in a room.
I didn't mean to reduce it to T-shirts and shit, but I remember making the T-shirt.
Yeah. Okay, so but yes, I totally forgot about that. Wow, Dee Dee. All right, well, cool. So NAACP, 2015, Boston 2024. Boston puts in a bid. Boston announces they're going to bid to be a candidate for the 2024 Olympics. Big conversation. And so this relates. And so Cierra talks about planning. So I think it's also important to say, like, this is a planning conversation that we're having. The investment fund gets a lot of attention. So it's money, but it's also, for me, what's even more important, it's about decision making, and it's about planning, and it's about governance of our own communities. And so that was what we were tackling then. So that was immediately a big conversation, because on the investment front, those who were excited about the Olympics coming thought, well, this may be an opportunity for a whole lot of investment to come into our communities, whereas our communities have been disinvested from for all these years, for so long. And this is within NAACP membership, so different perspectives. We were also looking at the fact that the Olympics I think the Winter Olympics was happening in Rio at the time, and they were also prepping for the Summer Olympics to happen in Rio. I think one or the other was happening, and communities in Rio were being cleared out for the Olympics. So we saw this like mass gentrification happening. In the study that we were undergoing to determine whether or not we would NAACP be pro or con, we were learning from researchers that the Olympics process in the city accelerates whatever's happening, positive or negative. And where we kind of landed was, we're not going to take a pro or a con stance on this, because the larger issue is stuff like this happens. We have people who make a big decision that impacts our communities. We're nowhere near the table when these conversations are being had, and then we're in the position of reacting, and that's a problem. And so for us, we said that the more important conversation here is planning and development, what that process in Boston looks like, and how communities of color participate in that process, which is right now terribly. And we asked Urban League and Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights, who were our peer orgs at the time, had they known anything about the conversation, and they did not. So we said, well, we want to kind of set a template for a different type of planning and development conversation in Boston, particularly with regards to communities of color. And that conversation is, you can't decide something, bless you, Jenny, you can't decide something and then try to get us to then buy in later. And your community engagement is about getting us to buy in. Okay, fine. So all the things are happening, hearings, community meetings, that whole thing. NAACP members were basically saying, we're tired of these processes. We're tired of these community meetings. We're tired of these hearings where we're being called in to testify, to share, our opinion, to provide input. And we know for a fact these 5 white dudes on the stage who are looking at us are not going to listen to us. They're going to smile, they're going to turn around, and they're going to do what they feel like doing anyways. And so we said, yep. So we're not participating in this way anymore. We're not doing it, and we're not going to ask our members to, and we're not going to ask community members to. So around that time, so, you know, as I said, as the chair of the Economic Development Committee, I became interested in, well, what's a different process for community members? Because that's frustrating, that's disempowering, and ultimately these processes, they're disrespectful. And so what's a process that we could participate in that's direct? We should be able to have something where we're able to say, I want to plant an apple tree, and an apple tree gets planted, and it's that simple. And, you know, we don't have to, you know, cut ourselves open in front of people and tell us.
That's what residents of Cambridge do. They love their trees.
Right. And so also what I was doing, this kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier with the relationships piece. You know, I was fine knowing that the NAACP Economic Development Committee was not like doing the best work in town. And that was fine. So, you know, if you're part of an organization, if you run an organization, you don't have to be dominant in everything. You don't have to lead everything. You can acknowledge where you're strong, and you can acknowledge where you're weak. So for me, my assessment was, I don't think we're doing the best economic development work in the city. I think there are probably other people out there that are doing better work. And I think our role was probably to take the brand and the legacy of the NAACP and amplify that other great work that's being done, but maybe it's under resourced, or maybe they're not getting, you know, the shine that they should get. And so I wanted to do just kind of like a landscape survey of work that was happening. And, you know, so I'm talking to people here and there, I'm meeting different people here and there, you know, a lot of those different people, having conversations, and they keep telling me I should meet Aaron. And they keep telling me, you know, you'll be there, he's working on something that you'd be really interested in. The other thing I should have mentioned is when I was thinking about the type of work, Dee said I was at every meeting. That's true. The other thing was, when I was thinking about the type of work that I would want us to uplift, I had certain parameters, which was, as I said, it needed to be direct. It needed to be concrete. So the other thing, and I feel like Jenny talked about this a little earlier, was, you know, community meetings. I mean, at the time, it definitely, maybe this is still the case. There were ways in which they were depressing, they were disempowering, they were frustrating. You know, I didn't believe in kind of getting a bunch of people in a room, engaging in fear mongering, or, you know, kind of, you know, kind of having people kind of at a fever pitch about a problem, and then there's nowhere to take them after that. And then you're mad, and you don't have an avenue for anything you can do. And again, definitely felt what members were saying, which was, and we don't want to be in a position of begging someone else to try to see something our way and be benevolent and do it. So, so I mentioned that just to say, I became interested in participatory budgeting. That's the other piece. I knew that the city had a youth participatory budgeting initiative. Was thinking maybe this is something we want to extend to all residents. So those are my parameters. So what is a process that's direct? What is concrete that allows us to actually do something, and that allows us to do more than plead our case? And there's a direct link between the decision and what happens. And so, as I said, people were saying, you got to talk to Aaron Tanaka. We finally met up. This is about halfway through 2015 now. He has, you know, Ujima on paper. He's talking to me about Ujima. He's talking to me about Center for Economic Democracy, and I'm just immediately sold. And just what Cierra says resonates. And really, what immediately got me was the piece of there were the two things. So one was the voting, and so as I said, that kind of that had everything for me, which was community members being able to decide directly what happens in their communities. And so when I saw that, as I said, that's sold. And then the second piece was the investment fund, where community members could also invest if they want to. And so for me, what was important about that was there are all sorts of ways we invest in our communities already. Black communities were economically diverse. We're working with different types of resources. There are definitely those of us who would want opportunities, and I'm one of them, to directly financially invest in our communities with the resources that we have, but a lot of those opportunities aren't there. So those were the two things that had me sold on Ujima.
Thank you. Did I get everybody? Okay. I just want to ask my next question. It's about COVID. COVID! Every single time I think about COVID, I think I've become desensitized to it, and I have to play Cardi B's version of coronavirus. That's every single time I start to think it's okay to leave the house without a mask. I just have to play that song real quick. How has COVID, I know that y'all have moved to some virtual meetings. How has COVID impacted the work that you're trying to do or that you're doing with the community members who most need to hear it?
I can go first. Even before COVID, Boston Ujima Project always had access. We did Zoom before Zoom was a way of life for our Wednesday meeting, because we have solidarity members that are not in the Boston proper. So we have members in Rhode Island and other states that tune in on our Wednesday meeting. So we always had access to, we always use Zoom as a tool. I don't know what just happened. Okay, sorry. We always use Zoom as a tool, and as a staff, we made the decision to be online even before the state, I'm pretty sure before the state made it official. So there's a way where the work continued, and we kept on moving, especially on Wednesdays, and engaging our community members. I think now we've gotten into a form of a rhythm of making sure that they're still receiving education, they're still feeling plugged in. I think one powerful thing that we decided to do as a staff was to commit to doing inReach to the membership. Because I think if one thing COVID is showing us is the importance of relationship, and not relationships that are transactional. So relationship where you genuinely care about the person. So as a staff, we committed in our member team to reach out to the people that said they wanted to be about Ujima, and call them, not to say, hey, are you going to do this or that, or can you give this or that, but hey, how are you? How's your business? How's your mental state in this place? And just so many members just said that just simple touch was so big for them. I think if there's one thing I believe that we've done well is just make the intention to act human. And I'm sorry, y'all, my internet is a little spotty during COVID, which is something that I think every one of us should commit to doing. And I'm going to pause because I'm going to disconnect.
Thank you. I wanted to also ask, so I know there's a general assembly. I know that there's like a membership. I know these things because my team went out and found all the things on y'all's website. But if people are too much so, that's my new favorite phrase. If people are too much so not in a good space to be able to go to the website and peruse the plethora of information that's there, what's a quick and dirty, give it to me like a martini with 2 olives, please, way that people can engage with Ujima and find out how to become a part of the community process, how to become a part of the community in general, because some of us are so disenfranchised at this moment. It was just So, am I a member?
Are you a member?
I might have given Aaron $50 a long time ago.
You are not a member. Didi, you are not a member.
What did Aaron do with my $50? It's okay. All right.
Spend it on Uber Eats. No, I'm just kidding. No, you probably invested. But you're a solidarity member. We see you.
No, Didi didn't invest. I know every name. I know everything.
You know what? You're absolutely right. Because I was talking with the Dorchester. What was the Dorchester? I don't know, the Dorchester Food Co-op or whatever the cooperative.
Yeah.
Yes, that's exactly what I did. I made a decision. My $50 went where it went, and I still don't know where it went. So anyways, let me shut up on this broadcast But I'll become a member today if you instruct me on how to do it, and maybe everyone else watching and who will listen later on Apple, Spotify, yada, 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 or whatever, can, like, what is a quick and dirty way that folks can, okay, I'm going to copy that. UjimaBoston.com join. Talene, can you write that in the comment section, please? Folks will write UjimaBoston.com/join. And what does joining do? Because I never got groceries or nothing from that co-op, so I don't know.
You want to answer what joining does, Cierra?
Sure. So when you join the Boston Ujima project, I guess you just become a part of the ecosystem. So first of all, if you live in the city of Boston, you're actually allowed to, Boston proper, you're allowed to vote on the investments. You're allowed to vote on all the decision making that happens. You know, all the votes that we'll have. And so you get to be a part of wherever that, you know, $5 million $5 million fund goes. You get to decide more or less like where the money goes.
Not more or less, like actually, really.
Yeah, you actually get to decide which businesses get investment, which organizations, et cetera, et cetera. We're doing startups now. It's lit. You are allowed to join the care fund if you don't, you know, if there are things in your life that aren't going too well, especially under COVID. We do have the care fund, which extends cash payments to our members and people that are a part of businesses that we love, ujimaboston.com/care fund, and people that work at Ujima businesses. You know, you get a direct cash payment every year if you sign up, if you decide that you need it and you sign up. Nia, what else? You get to have fun.
Yeah, you get to have fun. Thank you, Cierra. That was good. You get to co-create Ujima with us. So one thing we were also really intentional about in the beginning that we continue with is before we, you know, kind of launched membership and started going out and talking about Ujima beyond our organizing committee and working groups, was we created a skeleton, but we were careful to just keep it a skeleton. So it's not to create a completely blank slate to people, because I think a blank slate is kind of hard for people to kind of sometimes wrap their heads around. And so we created a skeleton, and the invitation is for our members to fill in the meat and whatever else is on a body, in addition to meat and bones. And so that process continues. And so we try to provide different avenues to do that. We have member teams that speak to different parts of Ujima where people can co-create Ujima with us. We do events, we have lecture series, we have arts. And I mean, and those are open to the public. That is the events and stuff. It isn't a function of membership, but really the invitation is to create this with us. And so I would say a goal for us is that this really is an organization that people see as theirs. And so that they don't see it as something that they've joined and it belongs to someone else. So ultimately it should be something that is actually owned by the members, and it is theirs. And you know, they're making investment decisions, they're making governance decisions. They are shaping the present and the future of the organization. And then also, as an aside, membership is support. And I see you smiling, Dee Dee, because Dee Dee's like, this girl.
Said I wasn't a member. I mean, I'm gonna reflect on it. I'm gonna reflect on it. I'm gonna reflect on it. Is all I can do. That's all I can do.
Well, I look forward to seeing the email that the notification on our CRM that said Dee Dee got a welcome to Ujima project email from us. But here's the other thing, right? So resources. Membership is also support. I mean, it's an annual fee. It's 25. So it's, you know, it's not like we're looking for all of our revenue to come from membership. But the other thing that I do think it's important to say, and I used to say this with NAACP too, people would say, well, what do I get with my membership? So there's that view. There's kind of like the benefits of membership, but there's also, again, if you want to have a role in building kind of strong institutions in our communities, you've got to support them. It doesn't have, they don't magically appear, and they don't sustain on like compliments and good cheer when you see us in person.
I mean, I guess I know that to be firsthand. So I will commit to becoming a member. I would implore 5 other people to commit to being a member. And if you comment now, I will sponsor your membership fee for the year. So that's that, and a bag of chips.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dee Dee.
There goes that dry humor again. But no, seriously. So if you comment now, and you are wanting to become a member and find out more about Ujima, and you are a Black person, I'm not doing that for anyone else. Then comment and I will take care of your membership fee. My second to last question is really, really the meat of the juxtaposition about what we are here for today. No, it's not. It's not the meat, but you said meat and bones. I started talking about the chicken. I made this chicken soup. Oh my God, it was falling off the bones. So I wanted to know, what are some of y'all's plans for the future? Oh, you want to go back to my chicken soup?
No. But can you also talk about why you refuse to watch Lovecraft Country? Can you make sure that happens?
No, because I don't deal with popular culture the way that a lot of other people deal with popular culture. It took me 7 years to watch Game of Thrones, and then I binge watched it all at one time. It took me 2.5 months to do it. I did it. And then only to be disappointed a year and a half later by the ending. This is why I don't commit. I don't commit to relationships. I don't commit to TV. And so I hear everyone talking about Lovecraft. Oh, it's such a great show. I'm not committing to that shit. I just finished watching The Wire in 2017. Y'all not gonna force me to be a part of y'all pop culture.
All right.
That's my resistance.
All right.
Okay?
You are in for some excellent storytelling in 2023.
Thank you. Thank you for the bookmark. I appreciate it. Like, so what's on the horizon for Ujima? Like, what do y'all got going on? I heard little birdie told me my production team was like, don't forget to ask them about what's happening on September 30th. But I didn't know how else to professionally say that. So what upcoming events are I don't even know how to posit that question. What y'all got going on? Who all over there?
That's you, Cierra. Take it away.
Me? Okay. So,
Yep.
Well, for one, on September 30th, we have our For Ujima by Ujima Fubu conversation. It's the first one. It's going to be really cute. It's about voting, participation, democracy. Voting, citizenship, democracy, and participation in 2020. We're kind of just having a conversation where we talk about the American project and the Ujima project and pit them against each other. No, I'm just kidding. Where we talk about how we all engage democracy, how we participate in democracy. Ujima is democratic, so we're having that conversation on September 30th, 6:30 to 8:30. We will be on Zoom. Please go to the Eventbrite. I'll drop the link in the chat so y'all can share it.
And that's the first in a series on those topics: voting, citizen participation, and democracy. We think we can weigh in on these conversations. So we arrived here because Cierra and James, who is not with us tonight, who I was going to try to call him and maybe surprise him and say jump on Zoom, but he said don't call him because he has a date. So respecting that. But just kind of thinking about
boundaries in the Black community, my next podcast.
Yes. But they were just kind of thinking about federal election and any type of intervention we might want to do just from a conversation standpoint. And it made sense, just not just from kind of like a sense of timeliness, but also our work, which is our work is creating local democracy, or a different, I won't say local as if there isn't any, but our work is creating a new, different type of local democracy here. So we felt like we could add 2 conversations about these topics: voting, citizenship, participation, and democracy. And the first, so it's one of a series because we're learning as we are trying to create these democratic processes with our communities. And so what we know and what we learn will shift over time. And so we'll want to share that with others, and we'll want to bounce what we're thinking off others. And what is accompanying the event series, and really this was first as a writing series. So really first was James and Cierra thinking of a writing series. And Dee Dee, you are a part of that. Thank you very much. So that's important to mention that we've reached out to a few writers who are writing articles about this topic. So Dee Dee is one of them. Kendra, who you mentioned earlier, is another. I believe who else did we reach out to? We reached out to Iraq, I believe, who's going to do something for us.
All my personal favorites.
Yeah, and who else?
Our new fellow, Mercedes.
And oh, you should totally talk about that, by the way. And our new arts and cultural organizing fellow, Mercedes Loving Manley. And then just the last thing I want to say about this, because I think it's going to be a great conversation, is this is titled Troubling It, because we want to be clear that this is not kind of like a get out the vote conversation.
Thank you.
This is, what'd you say?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I hate them spaces. I'm like, and they're serving sandwiches. Thanks.
Right, exactly. So it's not that conversation. So it really is intended to, number one, honor that there are multiple valid perspectives on all of these, on voting, on citizenship, on participation in democracy, that there's more conversation to be had other than giving people kind of like instructions to go out and do the thing just because. And so we want to just kind of give air to different perspectives, different experiences, and have that, what's the word? I guess I would say, again, just kind of accompany, what we believe, we know, and are learning about these topics. And so then what possibilities there are locally and what possibilities there are nationally.
Thank you so much. So go ahead, Cierra.
No, go ahead.
No, you wanted to talk about art.
Oh yeah, our arts and culture organizing fellow. So last year we have a couple other events coming up, so I should probably mention those. So our fall calendar is kind of booked and busy. We will have the Black Trust Arts and Culture lecture with Carolyn Hussein in October. We will also have our Black on Black investing workshop forthcoming. Nia, is there anything else specifically? Those are the three, our Art Place conversation. That'll be on Wednesday, October 28th at 2 p.m. You'll see these on, Facebook, Instagram. Follow our socials, at Ujima Boston. You asked previously, like, how people can get plugged in a very like low tech, easy way, sign up for the newsletter, sign up for, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and you'll find all the information on those streams. But we were going to talk about the fellow.
Yep, you were starting to talk about that, yeah.
Yeah, so this summer we chose our latest Arts and Culture Fellow. I was the first Arts and Culture Fellow before I started as the Communications Director. Now it is an amazing, artist named Mercedes Loving Manley. She's a rapper and a filmmaker and doing a bunch of other like really dope stuff. I can't even like name all. She's so cross-disciplinary. But yeah, so she's joined us. As of this month, she's officially our Arts and Culture Organizing Fellow. And we, I think before Ujima was even ratified by its constituents and like the members, like arts and culture was definitely very uniquely a part of like the conversations that we were having. I think that and even in Nia and I's first conversation, we were kind of just like, what is like the air that through which we walk in, and that is culture, right? Like you grow up, you watch TV, like where do people get their stereotypes from? Where do people, learn about their community? Usually it's either from media, books, TV, movies, if it's, if not from firsthand accounts. And it's usually not the firsthand account, to be honest. So we were kind of just like, what is the air through which people walk? And like, how can we do the work simultaneously by changing the culture to like kind of have these conversations. And so I think that's it.
Yeah, and then the only thing that I want to mention on that, because I've heard you say it a couple of times, Cierra, and I'll just take your word for it. So that fellowship comes with a $10,000 stipend. And so I've heard Cierra just mention a couple of times that there isn't a lot of kind of funding outside of institutions for artists in Boston that exists at that scale. So yeah, just, for us, it's important not only to kind of, have the rhetoric, but this has been said a couple of times by Charles and by Cierra and Jenny, but to also like really kind of do the thing and make sure what we're doing is showing up in practice. So we're also committed to making sure we directly support artists and cultural workers. We see them as workers in their own right, that are undervalued in our society. So also part of our kind of intention is making sure we properly value artists just as we value anyone else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Thank you. So my last question is a very complex question. It's so extra because it's me. And also, is there anything that you feel that we didn't cover that you're like, oh shit, and we didn't get to that? And I'm really surprised Dee Dee didn't touch upon that. And then the second part is, who would you like to see on the show if you watch the show at all? Charles's face.
I don't have an answer to either one of those questions, so I'm going to just leave it up to either Charles, Jenny, or Cierra. But I will say, I think you should let us introduce the next guest on your show. So this
Y'all
should
want to
end
introduce?
with us saying, and on the next show will be, I think
I
it's
like that
about
idea.
right? All right, we should do that.
I like that idea a lot. I'll type the name in the chat.
All right.
I don't think that there's a lot that you didn't cover already, or that we didn't cover already, that's important to say. I do think, though, that it's important. You mentioned that one of your friends or colleagues was like, this is a socialist organization, which I don't disagree with. But I think, one of the things that's important is to kind of, I've been doing a lot of reading and I'm a group of like people who are co-learning about abolition, because, it's this hot topic that's come up recently. And one of the things that they're talking about, and like this is some next level stuff for me because it's all like poetics and the poetics, and I'm like, what does poetics mean? And so it's just a bunch of stuff. But one of the things that we talked about is part of abolition being this rejection of Western rationality, meaning like there's one objective reality that we have to be beholden to. And I think socialism gets caught up in that kind of framework where there's a kind of socialism that everyone is connoting, like it's Bernie Sanders socialism or it's like communism. But I think Ujima exists in a really special place where it's like, yeah, some of these things might be socialistic, but we're defining what it is we're about outside of the bounds of what's already been politically imagined. So I think that's important to name. And I think the next person that should be on your show is No Name. That's my suggestion. I think we should make it happen.
I'll allow it, and I will put it in the suggestion box. Cierra, Jenny, do y'all want to offer anything on that question?
I think that Charles made an excellent point. And so I'm going to leave that point there. But if I had to dream, with y'all, I would say get Z-Way.
Jenny, I want to implore you to have the last word. Let it land with a Black woman, please.
It did land with a Black one. Cierra just held the fort.
Look at the support. Look at the support.
Oh, we're about that Black excellence on this staff. Out of all of your questions, this is the one that tripped me up.
I told y'all it was complicated because it makes you think. It's not a subject matter that y'all came here to talk about, what I'm doing, right? So
I think Nia just posted it in the chat. One thing that we didn't talk about is the fact that we are an all Black team. So all staff members currently on the Ujima team is
Oh, wow.
Black.
Okay.
So that's pretty amazing just to have that perspective, that space, that willingness to work towards Black excellence and at the same time be ratchet at the same time.
Yes.
It's glorious, Dee. Yes, I know, to your heart.
My heart warmed up just now. Like
I felt it all the way over here.
y'all gotta make space for the ratchets. I mean, I don't understand.
But I don't know who to suggest. So I'm not gonna say anything for that. I'll send suggestions if I can think of it. But thank you so much for bringing us here. It was so amazing being on this podcast.
Of course. Thank you.
Nia, you would try to end on like the most complex conversation.
You're like, well, actually.
Right. And I'm getting mine in the chat as if I'm not speaking, but I'm not speaking.
So do y'all want to introduce the next two guests to the podcast?
You put in one person's name. Oh, okay. You did it. Okay. Is both of these people?
Yes. So in that order. No, not the same.
Right.
In that order.
In that order. Okay. All right. So then what would be good at this moment? We have to have kind of like a scripted line. So it has to be something kind of like, thank you for
come up with
joining. Yes.
I gotta come up with the script.
Yes, Dee Dee. You're the personality. We can't do this off the cuff.
I don't even know what to say.
But I'm gonna try. All right.
I gotta go listen to all the old like reels of Hot 97.7, like when like Nicki Minaj comes on and she's like, yo, what's good? It's Nicki Minaj, come to Summer Jam. And I don't know, like, you know what I'm saying? Like
Exactly. So here's what I got. All right, let's do it this way because this should be spread across the Ujima team. So I'm gonna say a few words and then I'm gonna stop and then y'all should pick it up where I leave off, but it should end in an introduction of these people. Okay, you ready? All right, so I'm starting. Thank you for joining Ujima for this episode of The Full Set.
Next up, we have
the hosts of the Uppity Negress podcast.
And Alan Kwabena. Did I say that right?
Yes, I'm hoping so.
Stay tuned.
So stay tuned. I just want to thank all of Ujima Boston for, well, not all of y'all yet, but I thank y'all so much for joining me. I too am deeply saddened by James' absence from this conversation, but very happy that people are going and doing the things that bring them joy. So there is that. I just want to say thank y'all so much for each and every one of you, Charles, Cierra, Nia, and Jenny, for coming on the show and just informing us, giving us people power, like giving it back to us and putting information in our hands. So thank you very much. Y'all, this has been another amazing episode number 67 of The Full Set. I really appreciate y'all and I hope y'all have a good night. Peace.
Thank you, Dee Dee. This was fun. Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting us.